whenever you're sure of something, you're probably in limbic mode. When you know that the other person is wrong, when you know that there's only one way of doing something, when you're feeling angry, anxious, procrastinating something that you know that you have to do, those are all signals that you're in limbic mode, and you're going to be a lot more effective if you get into resourceful mode, because sometimes our brains are being flooded by stress hormones, which limit our ability to think critically, limit our ability to think creatively, limit our ability to be our executive function. And so we have to let those hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, dissipate from our brains. And that takes, if things are going well, that takes 30 to 90 seconds. Self-awareness can be learned through practice. The discomfort comes again from that limbic part of the brain. It's a protective mechanism to keep us safe.
It reminds me that our brains can't tell the difference between fear and excitement. So a really easy way to reframe if we're feeling scared is, what if we're actually feeling excited and not scared? What would that change about the situation? Fresh insights into what it means to lead today. Whether you want more innovation more easily, you are feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we'll uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead in this world today. Joining me is Mitch Weisburgh. Mitch's goal is to grow a critical mass of people who live happy, productive lives, who are resilient, resourceful, and collaborative in the face of obstacles, adversaries, and unintended outcomes. From 1981 through 2000, Mitch founded and ran Personal Computer Learning Centers of America, training adults in the use of computers and growing the company to over 130 employees. He then co-founded Academic Business Advisors in 2005, which helped organizations make a difference and reach more students in U.S. schools. He has started various nonprofit organizations in education, such as Games for Ed and EdChat Interactive. His book, MindShifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, came out in December 2024 and focuses on techniques to change from mindsets that hold us back to ones that propel us forward. Since 2018, Mitch has been writing content and teaching mind shifting and sense making, and has started a mind shifting community for educators. He writes a newsletter at MindShifting Educators about ways to inspire the mind to learn. And my tongue was kind of stuttery. Welcome, Mitch.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for having me. And I love the way you talk about uncommon leadership as a way to unite a person's mission and values with their business and their career.
I find it's always all the same thing and it all mixes up. And even though we try to separate them and it doesn't really work. Even if some of us are really good at saying, okay, this block of time I'm focused on work and the rest of the time I'm focused on not work, or when I'm in here with the door closed, I'm at work, and anytime else I'm not. It all kind of infiltrates each other.
Yeah, I found that out in many ways, but one of the ways I found that out was when I started the second business. I was working from home, and my daughter was in late elementary school. My son was going into high school. And as far as they were concerned, you're home, Dad. I want to go to my friend's house. Can you drive me? And it's like, I'm at work. I happen to be home. It's like, no, I want to go now. And And with kids, it's like you can say no, but they're very persistent, and it becomes more expeditious to say, well, okay, I'm going to bring you over, and then I'm going to go back to work, and I'm going to turn off my phone, and you're not going to be able to reach me, but I'm going to work at that point. So it all gets mixed up.
It really does. And it's not just kids that don't always recognize or honor boundaries that we try to set.
Right. Well, that kind of actually leads into the second book. The first one was the Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, and the second book is MindShifting, Conflict, and Collaboration. And I was in teaching the conflict and collaboration course over the last year or two. It's like that's where I got the most ahas from people, that people just feel that there's so much division, so many fights that are happening, and they don't know what to do about it. And yet when they start taking the course, it's like, oh my gosh, that's why when I say these things, people are resisting it. If I approach this way, then people will be more open to it. And then the other side of it is, oh my gosh, that's why I get so triggered when people say these things. And maybe it's natural for me to get triggered, but I don't have to get triggered. I can I can use my resourceful brain to say, wait a minute, I don't have to react that way. What would I most like? What are my values here? What's the long-term benefit that I want to get out of this? What could make it fun? And so when people started seeing that, all of a sudden you could see their whole bodies like start to relax and be open to all these times where people aren't doing exactly what you want them to, or they're opposing you, or they're competing with you, but you can still find ways to communicate them, connect with them, and work with them. And that's really what that second book is about.
I find we always know what to do to take care of ourselves. And to whatever extent we aren't doing that, it's every case that I've encountered so far anyway, that other people, well-meaning, have layered expectations and beliefs and processes on top of us, often since we were very, very tiny. And some of those are in direct contradiction to what we need to do to take care of ourselves best. And others of them just hamper our conflict or get in the way for various reasons. And a lot of this we don't even realize is there, because we don't remember when we were 2 that our Aunt Matilda told us that we must so-and-so in order to be a good little child, or to best serve the family, or to respect her. And we've been carrying that rule around ever since, translating that to everyone else that reminds us of Aunt Matilda in some way. And so it can be really tough if we just say, okay, I know I need to take 30 seconds before I respond to any question, because that's the time it takes me to understand how I want to start responding. If we have rules on top of that for I must answer right away, or whatever else it is, it's going to be super hard for us to take that 30 seconds with any consistency, because we have one thing, us, telling us this is going to help us, and an unknown amount of invisible other things weighing down, telling us that that is not the way to do things. And so we can't really make progress, consistent progress that sticks, until we start peeling back some of those other layers and getting rid of some of those rules.
I agree with you 100%. It's what you said really hit so many different areas. One, that we have these rules that actually the rules are arbitrary, but we think of the rules as the truth. Like, I have to get good grades in high school, otherwise I'm not going to get into a good college. I have to get into a good college, Otherwise, I'm not going to get a good job. I have to get a good job. Otherwise, nobody's going to love me, and I'm going to be a failure in life. I have to make this amount of money, and all those things really are arbitrary. And when we start realizing that we can change them, and go say internal and say, so what do I really want that aligns most with my values, we then empower ourselves, and we become, we have a lot more agency. We become a lot more effective. We become a lot more motivated, and just, happier as people. And then you also touched on, some of these stories, so many of these stories we developed as we were kids, and we carried them through forever. And you touched on the fact that when we're in the moment, we don't have time to engage necessarily the resourceful parts of our mind, because our survival parts of our mind are reacting in hundredths of a second, and they're basically telling us what to do in order to protect us, in um, in order to, I guess, comply with these rules that are arbitrary anyhow. So, and each one of those contributes to the fact that we think that we have to do these things, and then when we look back on it, it's like, well, I didn't have to do that, or boy, or we start blaming ourselves, we start blaming the situations, and none of those are helpful. And so, I'm going to turn this to you. Like, what do you do to get yourself to make that pause and not have that survival reaction, so that you can have a more resourceful reaction? What do you do? And I know you're writing about this in your book, right?
I do. This is a lot of what I cover in the book, The Resilient Tech Leader. And a lot of the work that I do with the leaders that I work with it's a combination for me of reintegrating our heart, mind, body, and spirit, because society to various extents, and business especially to a very large extent, and then even more as leaders, we are so often told what we need you here is your logical brain, your logical thoughts, be objective, and anything that is not objective just needs to go wait until you go home, because that has no place here in the workplace. But of course, we can't just take all the subjective parts of us out when we sit down at our desk or stand at our desk. We can't wheel into our desk. We can't just take our heart and body and spirit and leave those on the coat rack alongside our coat and hat and lunch bag. They're always here. And the more we try to divorce them out from the logical, objective parts of ourselves, the more likely they're to show up in really awkward ways, in really uncomfortable situations. So reintegrating that is a big piece. And then a second big piece is finding ways to make all of those invisible rules, expectations, beliefs visible, tangible, so that we can inspect them with our hands, with our eyes, with our ears, with our tongues, with our bodies, our noses, and suss out for ourselves which of these, how much of each of these is actually me and how much is someone else. And then that part isn't working for me. And then how do I remove that? How to remove that influence from me so that I can be more and more just who I am, and then acting the way that I want to these days.
And as you're saying that, I guess two thoughts that are very different, but it triggered two very different thoughts. One was that if we look, if we're only about being 100% objective and measurable, then basically that's what AI is going to be doing. And so if we're going to be successful as human beings, we have to cultivate those other things, because at this point there's nothing that AI is doing that really creates, that synthesizes, that feels, that has the emotion, that the things that really make us human. Um, and then the other thing is what are the things that we can do to be self-aware, that and I think you may have the same things too, is that I find that when I know I have to do something, that's a trigger to me. That, oh my gosh, I know I have to do that. That's probably a survival mechanism. That's the time I have to slow down. And the more I am positive that this is the only way of doing something, the more I know that it's most likely not the only way, and I have to get out of that limbic or survival part of my brain. I have to quiet it down so that I can think of other things to do. Do you find that also?
Absolutely. At times like this, I fall back on the rule of three, which says there's always at least three options for whatever you're considering. Three ways forward, three ways out of the box, three different things you could have for dinner based on what's in the refrigerator. If you only see one option, then it's not an option. That's a trap. If you see two options, then that's a paradox, because there's no way to know which one is going to be better. Now, if you have three options, now these are actual options and you can compare against them. And there's also something magic about getting that third option is often so much work. It can feel so hard and challenging. But once we break it through that, get that third option, then 4, 5, 6, 10, 180,000 tend to just come rolling out one after each other. And now we have a plethora of options and we can really get down and consider, okay, what's our best way forward? There's probably good parts of all of these that we can synthesize into something even better than any of them on their own and really start having a party.
And I think data shows that you brought up two options as a paradox. Two options are very often presented in our brain like this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and so that's another sign that, wait a minute, we're in our survival mode, and that's a time to slow down and say, well, I must be able to come up with a third thing that could possibly work. If I couldn't do either one of those, what's something else that I could do? And then once you start triggering that, the question, if I couldn't do either one of those, what could I do, is one way of triggering it. Another way of opening us up is like, well, I wonder what, I don't know, Bill Gates would do in this situation. Okay, or you just pick somebody who you might respect. You may not respect Bill Gates. I don't know, but you just pick somebody else. And what would this person do in this situation that might be different? And that also is another way of kind of fooling your brain into coming up with another option. And as you point out, once you get a third option, somehow or other options come, open up. And then just another thing that your statement triggered is that the data has shown that when decisions are being made and there are three or more options that were carefully considered, the results are significantly better, but that in over 70% of situations at work, only one option is considered. And so that's kind of like saying, well, we're going about making decisions really wrong in uttermost circumstances because we're just doing what we're doing, when really the data shows that we should have, three or more.
Yes. So I'm curious, in the work that you do, because this is a lot of what your course is about. What are
Right.
your strategies for remembering to stop take a breath, do whatever your reset ritual is to come back to yourself and be present in the moment rather than reacting out of.
So I think that the very first thing is self awareness, or what some people might call metacognition, and being able to recognize when we're in this survival mode or when we're in this limbic way of thinking. And so having just recognizing that whenever you're sure of something, you're probably in limbic mode. When you know that the other person is wrong, when you know that there's only one way of doing something, when you're feeling angry or anxious, or you're procrastinating something that you know that you have to do, those are all signals that you're in limbic mode, and you're going to be a lot more effective if you get into resourceful mode. Sometimes just that realization, sometimes that self-awareness is really all you need to do, because sometimes you can say, oh yeah, I was upset. It's because I had a survival reaction to that, but I'm okay now, and go on and be more resourceful. Sometimes there's positive self-talk that you can do to get yourself to be more resourceful. Things like, what would I really want now? But you still have to have the self-awareness. But then from the self-awareness, what would I really want now? What would so-and-so do in this situation? What aligns most with my values? What would somebody 5 years from now wish that I had done? Is this as critical as I think it is, or is this part of the 80% of things that really aren't that important? So questions that open up possibilities is a second way of accessing our resourcefulness. And then a third way is that sometimes we just have to take a break, because sometimes our brains are being flooded by stress hormones, which limit our ability to think critically, limit our ability to think creatively, limit our ability to be our executive function. And so we have to let those hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, dissipate from our brains. And that takes, if things are going well, that takes 30 to 90 seconds. So sometimes we just need to do something like maybe think of the things that we're grateful for is one way of doing it. Paying attention to our breath is another way of doing it. If you're in a meeting, maybe you can say something and get the other person talking and just pay attention to their eyes or their tone of their voice instead of exactly what they're saying. If you're in a position where you can take a walk, meditate, do some sports, listen to music, but something that takes your mind off of the problem, because when you're focused on the problem, you're just amplifying those stress hormones, so that the stress hormones go away, and then you have access to your resourcefulness. And those are really the three things that we can do for ourselves: is first of all self-awareness, second of all positive self-talk, third of all some type of distraction, or mindfulness. And sometimes we just can't do it ourselves, and we have to find somebody we trust who can walk us down. And that could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker. I know I can call my children. Well, they're not children. My kids are adults now. I know I can call either my daughter or my son, and I can say, something, I am really stuck right now. Can you walk me through something to help me regain equanimity? And inevitably, they're like, Dad, you wrote the book. Just use one of the techniques of the book. And it's like, no, I realize I wrote the book. I have the techniques, but I just can't do it myself. And, they'll say, well, okay, let me open the book. Let me just go to this page. Okay. Let's do some box breathing together, or something, but and they'll walk me through it. So that's the fourth way, is to find somebody who can walk you through it, to walk you off of the ledge that you're on, so that you can access your resourcefulness.
These are all great once we realize that we need to do something.
Right. Right.
How do you notice that, and how do you help people find their way to notice it? Because that is the hardest thing.
Well, that the noticing it yourself, the self-awareness, that's something that can be learned, and it can only be learned through practice. Now, whether you read my book, I'm sure you'll have techniques in your book also. People coach you through different techniques. You can learn that way. You can also, if you know that there's going to be a situation where you're going to be triggered, you can simulate those triggers and practice how you're going to react to them. So if you're going to have a difficult conversation with an individual, they've always been late, or you've always been late, and you're going to have a conversation, and they're going to talk to you about, you're no good, you're always late, you never do the work on time, and you can rehearse, well, the things that they're going to say to me that are going to trigger me are this. How will I maintain my equilibrium? How will I stay in resourceful mind even when they're trying to trigger me? And you can come up with ways. You could even ask AI. You could say, I'm going to have this conversation with this person. I know these are the things that I'm going to be triggered. What are some of the things that I should practice so that I stay in resourceful mode? And it will come up with, they're not going to be the perfect things. They're not going to be exactly what's going to happen in the conversation, but there'll be things that get you started so that you can prepare, so that when you're in that conversation, you're not blindly hit by something that gets you angry or upset or causes you to freeze or fight back. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I like the idea of practicing and role playing the situation that always tripped you up, or the situation that you're worrying about. It's a great idea. And one of the nice things about AI is we can do that with it in a reasonable fashion without worrying that we're going to feel embarrassed by having to admit to someone else that we're feeling this way, which can be really hard, especially because we're the leader. We're supposed to know how to do everything. And so, of course, we should be great at having this conversation that maybe we've never had before, that nobody ever taught us how to approach, perhaps. Or even if we know all the techniques that we just know is historically problematic for us for whatever reason.
I was going to say, I find that when I use AI, that AI itself tries to be too nice at first. And so if I'm going to have a difficult conversation with somebody and I want to rehearse it with AI, I have to instruct AI to deliberately say some things that might trigger me, and come back three or four. It has to come back 3 or 4 times with potentially triggering statements, so that it's really more like another person is going to be when I have that conversation. Because it will say something, and I'll say something nice, and then it will say, "Oh, that was brilliant. Yes, I agree." And it's like, no, that's not what the way the conversation is going to go. This person's going to say, "Why are you telling me this? You're always giving me stupid advice." And so you have to tell it to be mean back to you at least 3 or 4 times, so that makes the practice more real. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you when you were about to say something.
Yes, the more I learn how to work with AI, the more I learn we have to be very specific and detailed and verbose with it. This is one point where if we have the AI transcriptions of all the conversations we've had with the person, which if we've been doing a lot over video are really easy to have, then we can hand all those over and say, here's all the conversations I've had with Michael. Please consume all this and then have this conversation with me as if you are Michael, responding always only exactly the way that Michael tends to do. And then going into all the additional details that you were mentioning to reinforce that whatever parts of the way Michael is that you're having problems with, to make sure that it adheres to that.
And related, you could also say to the AI after doing that, give me an example of using I'm going to throw in a term, motivational interviewing, which is a really effective way of talking to people and listening to them. Using motivational interviewing as the way we're talking, and using him likely as an individual who's initially going to be upset at this conversation. Script out how a conversation might go where we're talking about and whatever the problem is, that that his code is sloppy, or that that users find the apps that he programs cumbersome to use, whatever the problem is going to be.
With all the work you've done with people and with yourself, where is the one point that you find people are most likely to slip up?
Well, to me, it's at the really foundation level. It's people are going to slip up because they're reacting from a threat standpoint, and once they're reacting from let me even back up from that. Is that the way I talk about this is that we have these, it's an oversimplification, but we have these two parts of our brain. We have the survival brain, which is geared for survival and is really, really quick, because the organisms from the very beginning had to learn how to protect themselves, and so there's a survival brain which reacts to a stimulus in hundredths of a second. And as human beings, we have our resourceful parts of the brain, and again, oversimplifying, but primarily in the prefrontal cortex, which I could call the sage part, the resourceful part of the prefrontal cortex, which wake up to a stimulus in, say, 2 to 3 seconds. And so when that survival part of the brain detects that something may be a threat, and it's very binary, it's like a threat could be you're going to get tired doing this, or a threat could be you're going to die doing this. A threat is a threat. So it detects there's a threat, and then it comes up with some action. And so when you start recognizing there's 5 types of actions that limbic part of the brain will come up with. It's either going to be fight, flight, run away, freeze. It's going to be some habit or something that you're fluent in that you don't really have to think about, kind of a rules based. Whenever a person pushes me, I'm going to push back. Whenever somebody asks me to code something, I'm going to look at this library. But it's going to be, something that you're fluent in that you can do by habit, or it's going to be something that everybody else is doing, something that you're mimicking or copying your crowd about. So that being self-aware is part of it, is saying, well, wait a minute, am I fighting right now? Am I running away? Am I freezing or procrastinating even? Am I copying what everybody else is doing, or am I just doing something that's a rule or a habit that because I've always done it that way? When you realize that you're doing one of those 5 things, it's like it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's coming from the limbic parts of the brain. And if it's worthwhile, then maybe you need to be able to access your own ability to critically think or creatively think or executive function to come up with alternatives.
One thing I find helps with this, in addition to all the wonderful things you just said, another thing that helps with this is remembering that perfection isn't necessary here, nor is consistency. And every time we remember to be present makes it a little more likely, a little more easy to be present again the next moment. And when we get it twice in a row, then it just makes it that much more easy to get a third. And it snowballs over time. So this, I find, removes a lot of the fear from, it's not even worth getting started because I know I can't do this more than once a day. Like, great. Once a day is maybe more than you're doing now. And even if you know you're already doing once a day, that's making it a little easier, a little to now do it twice a day, and then 3 times and 4 times and on from there.
And I'd say that another thing that helps us be open to trying some of these things is to understand again out of those 5 different ways that we react to situations, one of which is habits or fluencies. Habits or fluencies are built up by repetition. So our survival parts of the brain can get better and better by repeating the things that work. It may take cognitive effort the first time you become aware that oh my gosh, I'm in limbic mode, but after you've done that a second time and a third time, you're starting to develop the habit of doing it, and as you say, it becomes easier and easier.
As we're building these habits, the change we have to go through can be pretty uncomfortable. We are learning a new thing, and so for a while we have no idea what we're doing. That can be pretty uncomfortable. How do you help your clients, your readers, through that discomfort?
The discomfort comes again from that limbic part of the brain. It's a protective mechanism to keep us safe. It can't tell the difference between something that that just makes us a little bit uncomfortable or something that's going to kill us. And I'll say in that Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, there's probably 30 techniques that deal with that. One of the techniques is the perhaps I can technique, where when you're sure that you can't do something, generally you have something like a voice saying, I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that. That's not me, something like that. And if you try to fight that, that takes an awful lot of energy, and you're not going to be able to fight it for long, because the first time something doesn't work again, it's like, I knew I couldn't do it, so there it goes. But instead of fighting it directly, to maybe say something that opens up your brain. And one of the things that opens up your brain is that when you hear that voice saying to you, I can't do that, is to respond in a questioning, curious voice, perhaps I can, or what if I could? And when you respond that way, it doesn't work all the time, but in by far the majority of cases, your brain, just from having said that, can't help but start coming up with ways that perhaps you could. It does, because you're not telling the brain I can, you're saying perhaps I can, and the brain starts thinking, well, let's see, if I could, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. And then once you're in that mode where you're starting to come up with the alternatives, you're out of your limbic brain, and you're better able to try new things. So that's one. And the second one is related to the fact that if you think about it, the things, if in advance, you could make a list of, let's say, 5 or 7 things that you did in your life where you almost gave up, but you're proud that you kept it up and you did it. So you have that list of 5 or 7 things. And you think about it, in every one of those, you had that same feeling that you couldn't do it. And yet in every one of those, by doing it, you grew stronger, and you're really proud of it. So you can say to yourself, that feeling of anxiousness that I have now, that's a sign that this is a growth opportunity. And so you've turned something that you were originally feeling was stress into a different type of stress that's motivating rather than demotivating. And then when you succeed at that, when you've tried that, you first of all celebrate even trying, whether you succeed or not. But celebrate, especially if you do it. Maybe it doesn't work the first time, you try something else, and eventually it works. adding that to the list. So now instead of having 5 or 6 things, now you have 6 or 7 things that you've done. And every time you do that, you're building up the habit of understanding that this feeling of anxiety really is a sign that you're about to grow, and you're about to do something that you're going to be really proud of. So those are two. There's 20, 25 more in the book or the courses, and you could look them. That you could read them in my book. You could probably look them up on the internet as well.
Those are both nice reframes of the situation. It reminds me that our brains can't tell the difference between fear and excitement.
Same part of the brain.
So a really easy way to reframe if we're feeling scared is, what if we're actually feeling excited and not scared? What would that change about the situation? It's similar to what you were saying. And it's weird how these two completely opposite things can actually be the same internally. And why would our brain, how do we learn to choose one over the other, and why do we do that in some contexts and not the others?
So I think, I don't really have the answer to that. I don't even know if anybody has the answer to that. It's we've evolved over millions of years. I think that over time, depending on the environment we had as we were growing up and maturing, that either opportunities where we were trying something new, we received feedback that wow, you did this and you were successful, or you did this, it didn't really work, but the fact that you tried was great, and just try again. And so that feedback for some people will then give them the ability to keep on trying that. And for so many people, when they try something new, their parents, their friends, their siblings is like, you failed, and so you start reinforcing that you try something new, you're going to fail, you're better off not trying something new, and that just becomes stronger and stronger. So I don't know 100%. I don't know at all, how much of that is nature and how much of that is nurture, but the combination of the two, as we're maturing into adults, then results in the feelings of either, wow, this is something new, I can't wait to try it, and or wow, this is something new, I better not touch it. So so I guess I don't know, but that's kind of the explanation about why I don't know.
How much of this is down to innate levels of resilience we had at that point in time, or when each of these experiences happened? I've watched kids learning how to skateboard or learning a new trick at the skate park. And some kids will try it once, it won't work. They'll give up and they'll go do something else. And other kids will just sit there and do it over and 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 over again, falling literally on their face every single time, maybe from not a small height. But every time they're probably adjusting something a little bit differently, whether they recognize this consciously or not. They're approaching it a little bit differently. Something is shifting. And even if everything is exactly the way they are doing, everything exactly the same way every time, the environment around them is changing. The wind is blowing a little bit differently. The sun has moved in the sky, even if it's behind a million clouds. So time has passed on, so it's a little later in the day, which means that they aren't doing it exactly the same way. And at some point, something clicks and they suddenly get it.
And I would say, there's 3 gifts that we have by trying. We try something and maybe it fails. One gift is just the gift of practice. The more we do something, the better we get at it. And so by doing it over and over again, they're um, they're honing their neurons and they're honing their muscles so that they are getting better. The second is a gift of knowledge, is that they're learning certain things that don't work. Like it doesn't work when the hill is too steep. It doesn't work when the wind is blowing. And so there's the gift of knowledge, and then there's the gift of intention. And the gift of intention might be like, I just enjoy trying this. And so the gift of intention is, I'm going to continue doing this because I enjoy it, or I'm going to do this, and at the point where I get it, I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to buy an ice cream, or I'm going to be doing this. And then as I'm talking about rewards, I'm also thinking that when there's the more significant the external rewards or punishment for doing something, the more averse we are to taking risks. So if you want to give people under you the opportunity to try things and maybe make mistakes, but come back and hone them and get better, the more you're rewarding them or punishing them for doing the right thing or for doing the wrong thing, the less likely they are to experiment and to try to get better, because they're going to put their efforts into trying to figure out, how do I maximize my reward, or how do I minimize my punishment? How do I bend the rules? How do I make it look like I'm doing what's expected so I can get the reward, rather than the sheer effort of just trying to do it better?
Yes. This is one reason I talk so much about making everything a tiny experiment. Because first, it's an experiment, so it won't succeed or fail. It just gives us data. So right there's no reason not to do it, because you don't have to worry about failing at it. And the second is, if it's still too scary to do, it's probably there's something about it that's too much. And so there's always a way to shrink it down, to make it small enough that it feels safe to do.
Mm-hmm. That's a great strategy. Like, what's the first step? What's the minimum commitment that I can make to at least start moving in the right direction? I mean, really, how many times is there, an opportunity or a problem, and the first thing we do actually completely solves the problem? Like, never, right? It's insignificant things like, well, I'm thirsty. Okay, I just solved the problem. But we're writing code, we're creating an app, we're trying to meet a client's specifications. The first thing we do, is probably not going to solve the problem. And if we go into it with the expectation that we're either going to succeed or we're going to fail, we're putting the pressure on ourselves, and we're actually decreasing the likelihood that we're going to be successful. If we're going into it with the idea that we're going to do something, and between it operating and it operating with the client, it's going to give us information which we can then use to decide what to do next, then we're much more likely to end up with something that really works. And so that mindset of going into something with the expectation that we're going to get information, rather than the expectation that we're going to do this and then we're going to judge whether we succeeded or failed, is so important to resilience, right?
Yes. And because all those outcomes are just data, which reminds me that every emotion we have, that's also just data too. They're not good or bad. They're just things that happened. And especially for those of us in tech who, this is what we spend our day, every day doing, is figuring out how do we take all this squishy human stuff and translate it into very concrete, utterly repeatable steps so we can tell the computer what to do. This is what we do, is we're translating all these things that seem impossible to turn into data. And yet we forget that our emotions, our actions, the incomprehensible ways that our coworkers are acting, this is all data too. And there's always simple ways to start turning that incomprehensibility into data that we can then fold, spindle, and mutilate into something that helps us understand what's going on and then to transform that situation.
Yeah, I think as you brought up the emotions, and the emotions are data, I'm thinking also that we want to treat our emotions as scouts, but not as our masters. So an emotion, if we get angry at something, it's kind of a signal that something is wrong. But when the emotion then has us to strike out at a person, it's become our boss. And it's to understand, like, okay, I'm angry. That doesn't mean I should strike out, but it does mean that something's wrong. Let me figure out what that is. And so you're using the emotion as data, but you're not letting it dictate what your action should be.
That's a nice way of reframing the emotion from a scary thing, a naughty thing, a bad thing into a helpful thing. And while simultaneously reframing it from a thing that is controlling me to a thing that is assisting me.
Right, exactly. Very good. Yep.
And the more we can make both of those transformations in real time, the more we can turn our reactions into actions. Remember to take that pause or whatever a reset ritual is to come back to the moment and then use all of the wisdom we have from, yes, our logical brain and also our emotions, our heart and body and spirit, along with our mind, to choose our next action.
And in our past actions, I mean, we go through and maybe we did have an emotional reaction and we did go into fight mode or flight mode. And then, and then we have a tendency also to then get down on ourselves. It's like, hey, something, Mitch and Mike were just talking about this and I can't do it. What we could do is we could say, something, I'm human. I haven't done this a lot or ever. Let me go through, and if I could have done it in a fashion that was more resourceful or resilient, what might I have done? And so you come up with other ways that you could have had it, and then you play out and you practice them, you simulate them in your mind so that the next time you're in your situation, you're a little bit more prepared to act resourcefully. And again, if you don't act resourcefully, it's like, okay, so I tried it. This is what I did last time. I came up with a couple ways that I could do it. I didn't do it 100% right, but I did try something else. What else could I do? How could I have handled this a little bit differently? You could play it out with AI if you want to. You come up with the next time, because sure enough, you're going to be in another situation where you're going to get angry. And so you might as well use the past ones to help you improve rather than the past ones to just beat yourself up. You can't do anything.
Yes. Especially because the actual situation won't be exactly what you simulated or practiced. And also, even if it effectively is close enough that what you plan to do should have worked, the fact that it didn't means there's more aspects to it that you haven't recognized yet. So there's more to go uncover and make tangible. It's not that you did it wrong or you can't do it. It's that you don't have all the data yet.
And maybe you just need to practice it more.
Yes, more practice is probably always useful. Maybe I mostly don't believe in absolutes. That might be one of the three exceptions. An absolute is actually correct.
Oh, what are the other two?
I've come up with various. None of them are coming to mind right now. I'll probably remember them as soon as we go.
Yeah, right. I agree. Is that I also see things in shades, and not that it's right or that it's wrong, or I don't have absolutes. And I would say practicing something with the intention of getting better would be pretty close to an absolute of that's how you get better.
So one of the other, at least two, popped to my head, which is you are always enough.
Oh, yes.
And the reason I was saying there are three of these, it's really there are at least three of these, and this is going back to the rule of three. That part of the rule of three is that there are at least three situations where the rule of three doesn't apply.
That's funny. I like that.
And so with anything that is a rule, there will always be at least three exceptions.
And it's funny how organizations and bureaucracies are built for rules. And so the job of a bureaucracy, the job of an organization is to build rules and reinforce them. And the job of us as human beings is also to recognize, well, where are the exceptions and what should we do in those exception situations?
For people who would like to find your writing, find your books, find your courses, find the PDFs and activities you pulled out of your book, for teasers into your book, what are the best way for them to get in touch with you and find all this great stuff?
Well, so you mentioned teaser, and what I sent to you was a PDF on how to work with workplace conflicts, and questions that can transform situations that can be tense into situations that are more collaborative. And I would say you're welcome to take that and put that on your website and let people download it there. I could give you a URL that people could download it from me, but I think everybody already knows you, so they could go to your website and you're welcome to just put it up there. So that's one. My website is mindshiftingwithmitch.com, and then also from that website there's a link to a newsletter that I publish weekly, and I publish at least 2 articles every week, but the newsletter goes out once a week. And so if people want to click on the link to register for the newsletter, each article focuses on some aspect of resourcefulness, resilience, or collaboration, relating it to things that happen, every day, or that happened recently to certain people, and how they could have, or they might have, be more resourceful, resilient, or collaborative when they happen the next time. So mindshiftingwithmitch.com would be the website. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. The books are listed there. The 2 books that are out are both on Amazon. So if you looked up, Mind Shifting, Conflict and Collaboration, that's one book. Mind Shifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, you can find that on Amazon. But you could also get the links just by going to mindshiftingwithmitch.com and then click on the link to the book, and it'll take you right to Amazon also. So that's how people can find me.
That's great. Thank you, Mitch. And we'll have all those links in our show notes.
Well, thank you. So there was a question that you asked before we got on, that I thought about a lot, and I'm not sure that you're going to be necessarily happy with this response, but since I did think about it, I wanted to bring it up. Okay, so the question that you asked was, what's the business value of creating cultures that think like this, of valuing the whole human being? And my answer from the heart is I have this belief that if people relate to their own humanness and align what they're doing with what really motivates them, that they're going to be happier and more productive, and that translates into better business. And so that's my answer, that I think kind of corresponds with what you were, what you espouse also. But the answer that also occurred to me is whereas I believe that, I look at some of the largest companies in tech. I look at NVIDIA, Alpha, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta or Facebook, Tesla, and none of them follow that. They are all dog-eat-dog companies. And so I think well, I really believe this, but on the other hand, look at those companies. So I think that there's something wrong there, and I don't know what it is, but I wanted to just bring that up, that I really do believe that, especially as people in our workforce and working with small teams, that cultivating these types of cultures are going to lead to much more highly productive. But I don't know why these other companies that are so successful violate every one of those.
I have a guess.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And yes, their success shows that you don't have to bring in the whole human being to be successful. And two things. One is, oh my gosh, if they did, what could they do? Which
Right.
is both stupefying and potentially terrifying at the same time, depending how you feel about the impact they already have. Although that might, I think if they did consistently have everyone bring in their whole selves into everything they did, the way that they work and the impact they have would look pretty different from how it might look to some of us today. The second is, if I don't have a, quote, objective way to rate and review how you and each of your colleagues are doing, then how do I decide who gets the bigger reward, who gets the promotion, who gets the you're outstanding review versus the you're just excelling review versus the you're doing what we expect review versus the you're not doing well enough? And having all that ambiguity is fine when you're 5 people or 10 people or even 100 people. But as soon as you start getting big enough that this really becomes a question, because it can't just be that, well, the head of engineering or the head of marketing or the head of department knows each and every person and so can be the arbitrator across whatever the question or decision is. Then the logical mind says, well, we need a logical way to apply the same ruler, the same measuring stick across every person. And so therefore, we can't talk in terms of heart and body and spirit, in terms of dreams and encouragement and things like that. This is my guess of why the bigger a company gets, the more likely it is to try to make everything objective. You're welcome. And I'll just say, I've been in meetings at some of those giant companies with many tens of people looking at enormous amounts of data across massive sets of people. And every person in that meeting has a completely different idea of what all that objective data is telling them. So even in these places where they make a point of everything has to be objective, that's not going on.
Interesting.
This has
Well, thank you for entertaining that question.
You're welcome. If you ever come up with other guesses as to what's going on, I would love to hear.
So would I. Maybe that's something that some of your listeners can weigh in on as well. I mean, you'll probably get somebody from Microsoft or somebody from Meta saying Mitch is like full of it. Of course, we're, our company really does value these. So, I could be wrong. They could prove me wrong.
I am sure actually that is true, that there are at least pockets of people in every company who do, and regardless of whatever officially is supposed to be going on, that they are bringing a more people-centered approach. This is actually, now that I think about it, exactly what I've always tried to do when I was inside those companies at past times in my career.
And I'm sure the people you work with valued it, and you probably got more out of those people and enjoyed being with them more than if you had taken the the purely objective approach also.
Yes, for some people. And for others who all this subjective, squishy stuff is scary for whatever reason, being in an environment where everything is allegedly objective can be very comforting.
Yep.
I know this firsthand because countless engineers have told me, Michael, the whole reason I'm in tech is so I don't have to deal with people or emotions or some other squishy people thing. This has been a wonderful conversation, Mitch. What would you like to leave our audience with?
I'd like to leave them with that, yes, they're in tech, and yes, they're kind of translating things that into something that's very objective, but they are people in tech, and it's their humanity which is what's really making a difference, and to celebrate themselves and realize that their humanity is what makes the world go round. That's how we're going to live fulfilling lives. And so just take a moment, smell the roses, pat themselves on the back, pat somebody else on the back, and I hope that makes their day.
100%. Thank you, Mitch, for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
And thank you, audience, for joining Mitch and I today. We would love to know, what are you doing today to make your life a little bit better? Thanks, and have a great day.